All right, guys, welcome back to another video. So as we know, throughout 2023 and throughout the beginning of 2024, the industry has been going through some pretty rough times in terms of people being laid off, studios shrinking, IPs being canceled. All of those things have been happening. And I think the major reason it's happening is because the developers and the publishers are realizing that it's becoming way too costly to create some of these games, and the profit margins just aren't there. So they have to make changes going forward. Some of the changes we have seen, as I said, were the layoffs and the shrinkage of the industry itself, but also creating games that are sure bets and creating remasters and remakes, something we've seen PlayStation basically just bank on now going into year 2, where there's really nothing coming out from PlayStation in terms of new IP. Spider-Man 2 was the sequel to the first Spider-Man, but in terms of a brand new game, a new idea from PlayStation, really is nothing big major coming out. And we also got the Last of Us 2 remaster, got the Last of Us remake. So they're just banking on those games that they know will sell no matter what. And I expect to see a lot more of that from PlayStation, but also from the other players within the industry. And one of those players that it backfired on in terms of trying to come up with something new, which I think was actually a pretty cool game, and I'm kind of disappointed that I did fail as hard as it did, was Ascendant Studios, that was funded by EA for at least the marketing side of things. And that game is Immortals of Avium. We have some information here from some developers that spoke with IGN anonymously about kind of what happened with the game. So first of all, we now know it was around 125 million to actually develop and release this game, as this anonymous former developer here says that at a high level, Immortals was massively over scope for a studio's debut project. The development cost was around 85 million, and I think EA kicked in 40 million for marketing and distribution. And they say, sure, there was some serious talent on the development team, but trying to make a AAA single-player shooter in today's market was a truly awful idea, especially since it was a new IP that was also trying to leverage Unreal Engine 5. What ended up launching was a bloated, repetitive campaign that was far too long. And then there is another employee there that spoke that is actually currently employed, and they say, it's not a sequel or a remake. It doesn't take 400 hours to beat, has 0 microtransactions, no pointless open world grinding. Although not everyone loved it, it reviewed pretty well, currently sitting at 74 on OpenCritic and a mostly positive on Steam, but nobody bought it. And that employee was commenting on the fact that this game did check off a lot of boxes. And I agree with the employee that is working still, who responded here to IGN with this interview, more so than the former employee who is saying it was a bloated, repetitive campaign that was far too long and it really wasn't what people wanted. Immortals of Avium is not a bad game. It definitely is one that if you're looking for a new single player experience with some good acting, a decent story, and some fun gameplay, I would recommend checking out. And it does really not have anything that gamers hate, like overused microtransactions to try to suck more money out of you, no grinding for no reason, and a world that you can actually go through in a relatively decent amount of time and play through the game. So there's a lot of good things here about Immortals of Avium, but it just did not sell. People did not buy this game. Maybe it was when it released, because it released in August and there was a bunch of stuff coming out just slightly after that, like you had Starfield coming out at the beginning of September. So a lot of people's attention may have just not been on Immortals of Avium. Maybe that affected it. But the bigger thing here is that this is another example as to why I think we are starting to see less and less creative new IPs, less and less risks in the industry, which is something I've always really liked Xbox for, especially since the beginning of this generation. Phil Spencer has always said that they allow their studios to kind of make what they want to make, and they're willing to take that risk with new ideas and new IPs. You can kind of see it with their Xbox Game Studio IPs, and you see it with games like Grounded, you see it with games like Pentiment that were greenlit, all of those types of games Xbox has said okay to, even though they know maybe they wouldn't sell as well as something that is a sure bet. So we will see if this is something that continues. I feel like it is. I feel like we're going to go through a long period where we're just not getting that many brand new ideas, and there's going to be a lot more remasters and remakes to just make sure that these developers and publishers, when they do put out a game, they're actually able to make their money back, especially with the rise in the overall development cost. But this is what happened with Immortals of Avium. It just wasn't an IP that was known because it was brand new, and they had a hard time getting people into it, and it's failed, and they had to lay off half of the studio after it didn't sell. All right, now we know E3 is gone, but it looks like it is being replaced here by IGN. Now, I know this may piss off a lot of people or have instantly lose people's interest in it because it is being hosted by IGN, but they are actually hosting a live in-person fan event in June, 3-day fan event. Basically, it's E3. They're essentially taking over E3 that they just announced, and they say that IGN has announced it will host an IGN Live, an in-person 3-day fan event in Los Angeles this summer featuring gaming and entertainment creators, developers, publishers, and enthusiasts. And the event will take place in early June, and while official exhibitors are expected to be announced in the coming weeks, for now it promises to include world-class talent, parties, networking opportunities, and unique attractions from a curated list of leading exhibitors across gaming and entertainment. It will also include live IGN shows, tournaments, first looks at new releases and panels featuring headliners from games, television, movies, and more. So, I mean, it basically is looking like a mini E3. It may not start off as grandiose and big as E3 eventually ended up being, but I feel like this is IGN putting their foot in the ring here and trying to create something that is no longer there, which is that in-person live event that E3 has ended and backed out of. And I think this is actually a good thing to try to bring something back like this. Now, I wish it wasn't in Los Angeles because I don't live anywhere near Los Angeles, but they're bringing it back to where E3 was. And maybe we will eventually, at some point, maybe there's more collaboration for this in-person event where we start getting those big shows from like the Xbox, the PlayStation, the Nintendo, and then the other publishers out there. The biggest thing here that is probably going to be the hardest thing to ever overcome now going forward is I think a lot of these major companies realize they don't need to go in person anymore to these types of events. They can just do an online digital event, and it's essentially just as impactful as actually showing up and spending all that money to be at a theater in person. So we'll see how this is. We'll see what the exhibitors actually are. We'll see what people actually show up. We know PlayStation and Nintendo really don't go to these things anymore, so we'll see if maybe they somehow entice them. I feel like Xbox would probably end up being at this if it does get big enough, because they actually are the only one out of the big three that do end up attending all the different types of events out there. All right, there is some patents that Sony has put out that potentially may signal the future as to what we can expect in terms of the use of AI, as well as just the improvement in terms of how people experience games. So there's this first patent here that Sony is working on. It's an AI-powered AFK helper. And basically, it's AI hypothetically is going to be able to know when you've left your game, specifically in VR, and you're away from your headset. And then that AI is going to be able to move you within that game into a safe place, like put you in pause, move you to a place where you're not going to get killed, so you come back to a game over screen. And what it says here is based on Sony's recently published patent, its hypothetical AI powered product will likely serve a limited, highly specific function. And going by the patent, Sony is hoping to leverage the power of AI technology to offer players a helper that will make the PlayStation VR experience more seamless in between play session interruptions. It says, as covered in the patent, this hardware would leverage AI to assist players at the very moment a player goes AFK, the duration of time a player spends AFK, and the moment a player returns from being AFK. It's basically a helper that keeps you from dying within your game if you do go AFK. If you were just to rip off your headset because something came up, you didn't have to go check. You didn't hit pause yourself, and it'll do that for you. And then the other patent here is another one that's just kind of helping you in terms of if you forget to actually do it yourself. And that is a patent that is going to allow players to take voice and video calls. So if you're in a game communicating, you're on your mic and you get a call and you start talking on the phone, apparently this patent is going to be able to detect that and then blur out your speech for the phone call, and it'll know that you're not trying to talk to the person through the game. So just two quick patents here that I thought were kind of interesting in what we are seeing, at least PlayStation look at going forward for making people's experiences better on their platform, essentially making people lazier, I would say, because these are both things that you could easily just do yourself, literally hitting the pause button or muting your mic or unplugging your headset or something like that. But all of these things, obviously, people do sometimes forget to do. If it's just a quick reaction, somebody's at your door, you take off your headset, or you get a phone call and you forget to hit mute, and maybe it's a confidential phone call. Now everybody in the game is hearing you, the person person you're in a party chat is hearing you. So these things could be somewhat helpful going forward, but two interesting paths I thought that maybe we'll see coming to a future update for the PlayStation software, or maybe going into the next PlayStation itself. And then sticking on Sony, we have some very interesting news here. Rise of the Ronin is coming out next month, and I think a lot of people are anticipating this game as they're excited to play it if they're on the PlayStation platform. But we have some weird thing going on here that they are actually going to be canceling the release of this game in South Korea. Now, here is the reasoning why. This is at least what they say. Team Ninja game producer and director Fumihiko Yasuda compared Yoshida to the Greek philosopher Socrates in a behind-the-scenes Rise of the Ronin video release last week, which is viewable above, and says this: although it was different world in a different time, I believe he could be compared to Socrates. I wanted to depict his teachings and his life from the moment I started working on the Rise of the Ronin. He wasn't just a philosopher, he insisted on the importance of taking action. So this character here is a controversial figure in Korea, and there's no official reasoning why they're taking this game away or canceling the release of this game in South Korea. But the speculation right now is the decision could be related to the scholar Yoshida that was mentioned in that quote. Now, I don't know anything about this part of history in terms of what this would mean to Korea, so I don't have really any comments on that, but maybe somebody in the comments, if they do understand this entire thing, I would love to read it and hear about it. But apparently they say here, Yoshida nurtured a number of political activists who made major contributions to the Meiji Restoration, which restored imperial rule in Japan in 1868. He was also an advocate of the conquest of Korea, which would go on to be ruled by the Empire of Japan from 1910 to 1945. So I guess because of that, there is probably some pushback from South Korea, and Sony has now made the decision that they will not be actually releasing the game there. So we'll see if there's some future comments on this, and maybe there is more information that we can kind of fully understand as to what is going on here. Now let's jump over here because there are a bunch of sales on Xbox, and I know we are heading into maybe the biggest day in Xbox history for some people. I mean, for me, I don't really think it is, because I don't think that the business event on Thursday is going to be life-changing or game-changing or that actually crazy compared to what some people are making it out to be. I think everyone's still going to be on Xbox, getting their games on Xbox Game Pass, and your gaming experience isn't going to change. So unless you really care about potentially other people playing a game, that may be the only thing that really has everybody talking. But as we lead up to that, there's some great sales on the Xbox store. They've added another 250 games and deals, including a publisher spotlight sale. And some awesome games, or games from 2023 and even before that. But if you haven't played them, maybe now is the time to check them out. For example, Hogwarts Legacy Digital Deluxe Edition is 40% off. You have Mortal Kombat 1, which I believe is a good amount off here. I think it's like 40% off as well, actually, which I mean, still good because it's an incredible fighting game, the one that I play the most of right now in my fighting genre of games. You have Saints Row Remastered, or Saints Row the Third Remasters, which is a ton of fun. If you didn't like the newest Saints Row, go back to the old ones, check that out. Time Splitters Future Perfect. I mean, Time Splitters, this was the one that definitely breaks my heart, but it's really cool that they added this to backwards compatibility. And I would highly recommend checking out the Time Splitters game. It broke my heart when they closed down the Free Radical studio, basically, that were going to reboot Time Splitters, because the Embracer Group has been doing what the Embracer Group does and purchasing up a bunch of different studios and then closing them down. So it broke my heart that we're not going to see that Time Splitters game come back, but go check out the older Time Splitter games if you've never played them, because they are a ton of fun. And there's just a bunch of other stuff here. Just wanted to bring this up if you were looking at some of the sales that were coming up for Xbox. But that's it for me. Not a crazy news day, but we will continue to cover the news throughout the week. If you did enjoy this video, if it's your first time here, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. Appreciate all the support, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.